Okay, I'll tell you a story. When I was 13, I went to the northern region of my country, Chile. Here, the north is hot, very hot. We went camping with my family. Mom, cousins, brother, aunts, and uncles. Outside the city, where no one goes because the beach has wild waves, too dangerous to swim. We were all born in the coast, so we know how to handle the harsh tides. Most of my cousins were older than me, but there was a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, both boys, and a 4-year-old girl. We told them scary stories, and the adults scolded us pretty badly. The 7-year-old Lucas was hyperactive. Even asleep, he moved a lot. He couldn't sleep alone either, so the teenagers took turns every night to sleep with him, because the adults wanted to stay awake until 2 a.m. And it also worked as a punishment for telling the youngest one scary stories. When it was my turn to sleep with him, it was only the two of us in the tent. I was tired and went to sleep earlier. He'd squeezed me every time he heard a noise, asking if their stories were actually real. I said they weren't, so he should be afraid, and he was going to be okay with me. I woke up around 3 a.m. I was alone in the tent. It was silent. I was supposed to be in the tent with my little cousin, my brother and my older cousin Christian, who was 22. I freaked out and went out of the tent looking for Lucas. I thought he went to my parents' tent, but he wasn't there. My brother and my oldest cousin were in the van, sleeping with one earphone each. I thought Lucas might have gone to pee, so I looked around the rocks, told myself he should have woken me up. Then I found him, staring at the ocean. He was shaking. Nights in the north are really clear, and the stars make it easy to see in the dark. "Lucas, let's go back to the tent," I said. He didn't respond and started crying. "The ocean isn't that scary at night. Come on, we have to." I stopped when I saw the silhouette of a big man approaching my little cousin. I ran to grab him and he screamed in terror. I took him in my arms and ran to the camp to wake up the adults. None of them did, no matter how hard I tried. I yelled, I slapped them. They didn't wake up. The man arrived at the camp with Lucas in my arms. I ran to the highway. The pebbles were hurting my bare feet, but I didn't care. I went on with the hope of seeing a car pass by. I tripped. I couldn't stand up anymore. Lucas was hugging me so strongly, I could feel his fingers desperately clinging to my back. I told him I couldn't stand up like that I would take him in my arms once I was standing. The man was approaching. I couldn't feel my legs. My cousin crying, begging me to protect him. I couldn't breathe. The man grabbed my shoulder and shook it. "Give me the boy," he said. I lifted my arm and yelled, "You won't take him! I'll kill you!" Out of nowhere, I had a knife in my hand. I was going to stab that man. He shook my shoulder again. I opened my eyes. It was Christian. Lucas and I were in the tent. He was crying, squeezing me so hard I couldn't breathe properly. I had my right arm raised, just like in my dream, but my hand was empty. Lucas and I had the same nightmare. When I was about 5, I'm 13 now, my family lived in a house that was built over 100 years ago. I only ever saw anything strange once. I was in my bed. I had a bunk bed at the time, and as usual, my parents were downstairs, and the landing light was on. My bedroom light was off. I remember it was quite late. I was just about to drift off when I heard the landing light click off. I opened my eyes to see that the landing light was now off. I was confused because I could still hear both my parents talking downstairs. Then something caught my eye. By the door of my now dark bedroom, I saw a lady wearing a posh dress. Or rather, the shadow of a posh lady wearing the dress. Just the shadow. In my young age, I assumed the shadow was my mother. "Mom?" I said quietly. The shadow advanced forward. "Mom?" I said a bit louder. It was then I could tell this was not my mother. I screamed, causing my parents to run upstairs. They entered my room and turned in the light, and the shadow disappeared. I'm not lying, I know what I saw, and that was the only time I saw it. Another thing to note is the house had a basement that got sealed off before we could move in. I have more questions than answers, but I'm sure that something happened in that basement back when it was built, and that shadow had something to do with it. Okay, so recently a lot of weird shit has been happening at my grandparents' house. To start off with, I stay there a lot. I'm only 15, so when your parents can't get their shit together, you have to stay somewhere. I'm gonna try and keep this story short, because like I said, this is all recent. Anyways, let's get to what's been happening. It started when me and my sister went fishing at a creek behind their house. Mind you, they lived in the middle of fucking nowhere. This is all in New Market, Alabama, so if you want to look this place up, you can, because I'm not lying when I say it's in the middle of nowhere. Back to the story. When me and my sister, who's younger than me, were walking the trail back to my grandparents' house, my sister started acting weird. When I asked her why she was acting so paranoid, she said that she thinks there's someone watching us. She pointed behind us to the tree line to, sure enough, see a tall, creepy-looking man in the tree line watching us with his hands on his knees. I am a guy, but even so, this sort of freaked me out a little bit. It took me back to when my parents would talk about the New Market cult that terrorized them when they were kids. They both lived within a mile of each other at the time. Me and my sister got back to my grandparents' house pretty safe. Sadly, this wasn't the only thing that happened. It only got worse. The next thing I actually got on video. If y'all know how to post snaps on Reddit, please tell me, because the only reason I got this app is to tell the story. I still remember, I looked at the clock and it was exactly 3:34 a.m. I was talking to my friends on PlayStation. The room I was in the back of the house, closest to the cult. I was home alone and pretty tired at the time. If anyone lives near me, then you know how foggy it was Easter morning. I actually didn't hear the sound at first. I have soundproof headphones, so it was my friends that heard it. They told me to video it, so I walked outside and I did. The sound almost sounds like a wounded cow. I would say that it was a cow, but the problem is that first off, the cows aren't allowed at night. And two, the cows weren't even living there at the time. They take them to a different farm every month so they can eat fresh grass. The scariest thing about it was the noise kept getting closer. So close in fact that at one point I was in my grandparents' backyard. It even got as bad as me waking up to scratching noises at roughly 4 a.m. I don't get scared very often, but this was terrifying. Nothing has happened since, but I'll update if something does. If I figure out how to post that snap too, I will. Update. Anyways, I went looking for this cult last night, and it wasn't very hard to find them. The reason I went at night was because I had a baseball practice after school, and by the time I got home, the sun was going down. I invited Greg over, and we went together. I'm not a weak guy, pretty athletic, but Greg's just big. He's already 6'3" and only 14 years old. Me and him grabbed our knives and walked along New Market Road. It isn't a long walk, just a few houses down. We reached a dirt road and headed down that. The road leads into different pastures, fields, and ponds. It's really relaxing, almost to the point that you forget what's really out there. It's a long walk down a steep hill that leads to a flat pasture. The dirt road that leads along the creek that connects to the Flint River. We walked along the creek for about an hour and didn't see anything. The only thing that kept us from leaving was a sinking feeling of being watched. It may have been my paranoia, but I swore someone was watching us ever since we stepped on that dirt road. Everything was pretty chill until we reached the tree line. This tree line was really thick and almost impossible to walk through if you had wanted to due to all the thorn bushes. I remember a story that my mom told me when she was little about how she went to pick a rose from a thorn bush. She was 7 then. A man jumped out of the thorn bush and chased her back home. No one believed her when she had told her parents. I wondered if that same bush was in front of me. Around that time, everything got real quiet. The birds, frogs, crickets, and even the animals stopped making noises. I remember how me and Greg stopped talking and looked at each other. I could tell he was scared but tried to hold it. It was like fear was just there. Our instincts told us to run anyway. We were looking at each other when we heard a snap in the woods. We spun our heads to see a tall man with a deer skull over his face. The world slowed down and my mind raced 1,000 thoughts per minute. This man was right behind us and had one hand on a little tree, pulling himself around to see us clearly. A scream jolted from us, from our trance of fear, and we ran for the hills. After the scream, the bushes started moving, but we didn't stick around to see what came out. It probably took us about 5 minutes to run an hour-long walk. I couldn't feel anything but the tingling of my adrenaline as I raced alongside Greg for my life. We stopped at an abandoned dry cleaners and sat in the parking lot, asking ourselves what to do. And Greg had tears in his eyes, and I was a bit shook also. We debated whether we should call the cops or keep it to ourselves. I told him not to, but he called the cops anyways. They only searched the grounds for about 15 minutes. The only thing they found were ashes from a fire in the woods, but put it off as campers. They acted like they did, but I could tell that they didn't by our story. Greg went back to his house, and I went back to mine. That was yesterday. Today I'm home alone, and really not looking forward to it. If this cult comes to me, I got a shotgun waiting for them. I know this sounds bad, but if they break in or threaten me in any way, I'll probably shoot them.